Hey there, and welcome to episode number 20 of season 2 of the World of Presentations podcast brought to you by us at 356 Labs. My name is Boris. I'm the founder of the company. However, as I was saying in the last probably now 10 episodes, I'm not the important person in this episode because I have way more important person for you joining me this time. With me is somebody that I was trying to get for how many months, Emma? Is it 2 or 3? Is it 2 or 3?
It's been a while. I think COVID interrupted a few things.
Yeah, so let's say 2 or 3 months. So finally she is here. Emma runs a very interesting and very, very cool presentation agency. However, they are located in Australia. The agency she runs is doing incredible stuff, and that's why I think that she can share quite a lot of things with us. So Emma, welcome. Finally, 3 months later, welcome to the podcast.
Yay! Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to
Absolutely.
share my
Tell us a little
insights
bit
with you.
about yourself. Tell us a little bit about the agency.
Well, if I start with myself, so I'm the founder and only owner of Presentation Studio.
Yep.
And as you might tell from the accent, not a proper Aussie. I've been here about 20 years and originated in London. So born in London, and started my work actually in London. And I was designing presentations for banks, and we all
Okay.
know how exciting those
Very
PowerPoint
much so.
presentations can be. And they were trading in, well, then it was pounds, billions of pounds of really important, not hedge funds and all these kind of things. And like, no one was listening, and so I tried to get my point across, but really no one cared. So they just wanted the same thing, what they've done before.
Yeah.
And so I was like, there's just an opportunity here to do this better. There's such high stake presentations and it's so boring. And so I left England in 2002, and because I just had enough. It was grey, it was sad, it was just, I'd had enough. So I came to sunny Australia.
Yeah.
And started working for a company that actually did quite a lot of presentations for their focus groups. And they got behind me and were like, yeah, we have these insights and we can start to actually visualize those and then share the jargony bit, the proof afterwards. So I really started believing in it. And in 2006, I had my first daughter and set up working from home. Kind of gone full circle because I'm now back working from home. So I literally had her on my knee creating presentations, and there was no competitors at that time. It was really a case of you'd tell people what you do and they were like, what, that's a thing? Like, I didn't know that people could help you with presentations. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, God, I wish I'd known that last week. They get quite excited. They're shocked and then they're excited. And so it was a rapid growth. And that was a huge learning experience for me because I had been the designer when we first started, actually, my dad created the website, which is really sweet.
In our case, I created it.
No, it was so sweet of him. And we had two core services, really. And one was PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And one was tidy me up or make me proud. And so the tidy up was literally what's on the page, stays on the page, but we make it look better, format it consistently. Make me proud was us delving a bit into the content side of things. Not really, because it's not my specialty and there was only me, but spreading stuff across slides, making it much more visual, spending more time on it.
Yeah.
And within about 3 or 4 years, we'd grown. I got my first employee. I was starting to get a wage, which was exciting.
Yeah, I also remember that moment.
That first sort of, like, you get your first employee before you pay yourself, and
Mm.
then
Mhm. Mhm.
and then I was fortunate enough to really have a passionate team who were very, very good and very really believed in what we were trying to do, because we were working with charities that were trying to raise funds. There were the big telcos and financial companies that really needed lots of service. So they were kind of our baseline. And then we were able to do some more creative work as well. So we had a really
Yeah.
good structure. We built in the content team,
Yeah.
because that was really the vital piece of the puzzle that was missing. Because you can't just keep, you can't make something look amazing
Yeah.
without,
The story itself.
yeah, and removing some of the words and then really understanding what the whole process.
Yeah.
So we had to then have a strategy of explaining the best practice and process to clients, and that's quite a task,
Yeah.
because then you have to justify your expense almost, because you're telling them what you're doing and how the process works.
Yeah. But along the way, you did something like the agency grew a lot, right? So that was for sure. It was a lot of fun to build that stuff. I mean, and working on that part for sure.
It was, and like, going back, I mean, we had at one point close to 30 people,
Yeah.
and then it becomes, for me, not a designer. It becomes a case of people management,
Of course. Yeah.
which is probably not my key strength. But
Same here.
it when we were small, it was great, because we could sort of, someone would have an idea and we'd all get excited and we'd all hear it and be part of it and do it.
Mm.
And when you get to like 30 people, communication channels become a problem, because
Yeah.
you have managers who then, you need them to communicate the same thing, but it becomes a bit Chinese whispers,
Yeah.
and not everyone hears the same
Yeah.
thing. So
Totally.
the communication is so vital.
Yeah.
And I made a few mistakes, definitely, but we're strong. We had really good teams. Strategy was the focus, content, design, and we're still built that way.
Yeah.
That's the way that we
I
help
also
people.
know that is, by the way, something that I didn't have as a question, but I'll throw it as a quick one. How I know that I know that you have the Surface Studio. How much do you love that device?
Oh, I'm on it right now. If someone took this from me, I would cry.
I also really love the device. I don't have it. I'm waiting for the third edition version, whatever. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, hopefully so.
I've lost the dial though. I should probably go and get the dial, because I got used to using it. I don't know, and moving it seemed to.
Okay.
Um, but there's the
Yeah.
wall one as well, which
Yeah, I know that
I
one.
was going to get for work, but I can't really justify it at home.
Yeah, same. Same. Yeah, the Surface Studio, however, is an incredible one. We are now that we are organizing the event, Microsoft will sponsor the event, and the lady that we are talking with, her name is Andrea. We were having a call like 2 weeks ago, and she was like, "Okay, Boris, something else that I can help you with because I think we are done." I'm like, "You think like you know what? I have something for you. Can you talk to Panos to kind of do something about the Surface Studio 3?" And she was like, "I'm not sure that I can do that, you know." And for
Just a
those of you,
trial.
yeah, yeah, she was. For those of you who don't know who Panos is the person at Microsoft who runs all of their devices, and he is, by the way, really, really great incredible presenter in the last few years. Microsoft changed dramatically in the way they present. Now, back to us being helpful to people. You work with a lot of organizations, a lot of industries. What are the things that you see those people do wrong? Like, what are the top mistakes that you see businesses in your region or with the customers that you work with, like, frequently do in a wrong way? Like, what are they missing?
Yeah. So you're right. We work from, the big corporate enterprise teams that, thousands of customers
Mm.
like Microsoft and
Yes.
the big telcos, financial companies. And actually, the higher up the chain you go, the easier it is. So
Yes.
working with a CEO, CMO, they get it. They
Yeah.
they just they
So
tell you
strange,
what
right?
they want to, because they know what they're trying to say. They know who they're talking to, and their brains work strategically.
Yeah.
But then you go down a level and you've got worst case scenario, 5 or 6 or more, sometimes we've had 12 managers
Yeah.
who are all trying to be heard, get their point across, and none of them can agree on the key objective of the presentation.
Oh.
And it can sometimes it can take a full day to facilitate simply what the objective of their presentation is and who's
What they
going to
want
talk
to
about
achieve.
what. And
Mm.
um, or you get the case of one individual coming to you with a brief, but they haven't really clarified that with their boss. So we run down one path, create what they've given as the brief, but when
Mm.
they show it to the boss is, who hasn't been involved at all, goes, "What the hell is this?" And then we cop it for not doing the right job. So
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, by
um,
the way, yeah.
I think that the different levels are quite interesting in the way that they work. I mean, I had one evening in the early days, I had a Scottish guy call me up and he just said, "Oh, hey, I need some help with my presentation. Can you help me quite quickly?" And I said, "Yes, of course." And he said, "Right, my assistant will send it to you tomorrow." And it was the CEO of BHP Billiton, who is
Mm.
a pretty big mining company. And he just dialed straight up, had the presentation, and I was like, sweet. So yeah, it was crazy. But I think that gets to the essence of what makes a good presentation, which is knowing really what your objective is and what the message that you're trying to leave people with and what
Yeah,
you're asking them to do,
yeah.
and then knowing who you're talking to. It's the
This is something
same
that you said
problem
that
for all of
yeah,
them.
yeah.
Yeah. And the really big companies, consistency is often a challenge
Okay.
because,
Is it design consistency or
yeah, so the brand consistency.
okay?
So like when I started in London, I was actually working for Deutsche Bank, and they had brand guidelines that were A3, so like double A4, and about
Mm.
sort of 4 inches thick, like massive brand guidelines, very, very strict. And for me, that was probably a good learning point because I learned that if that's a millimeter off, you fix it. And
Mm.
so now you've got corporates that are really struggling if they've got thousands of people in their teams to be consistent across their
Yeah,
presentations, especially when you have things like design ideas popping up
yeah,
and people going, "Oh, that looks nice," but it's completely off brand.
yeah, yeah. So figuring out, so hearing you is, hey, people are missing to define what they want to achieve, meaning the goal or the big idea, depending on how you define it in our industry. And then also keeping up the consistency with the brand is obviously an issue. So I don't know, you said that managers on different levels see presentations in a completely different way. Just wanted to ask that one because we already have it in our brief for probably maybe a year now, where we end up working with the assistants of the
Oh no.
CEO. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the first time we did it, we kind of had this bad feeling that something is wrong, you know. But she was constantly pushing us. Yeah, I know what he wants to say. I know what he wants to say. I'm like, you sure? Like, are you really sure that this is what he wants to say? And then the presentation is done, and then we show it, and it is not even close.
Yeah.
He went ballistic on everybody in the room for some
Yeah.
reason. He was like, okay, like what is this? Who wrote this? Like all of those things. And I'm like, I knew it. I just knew it. There was something
Yeah.
very wrong. So now we ended up asking, like if we're working
Yes.
with the C
Good.
levels, you like, are we able to talk and work with that
Yeah.
person?
Just
You know,
10 minutes of his time and
absolutely.
he'll tell you what he
Did you
needs.
have you experienced anything like this also? Like, have you had that case?
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. And then it's actually quite frequent. And yes, now we really try and get to the key stakeholder,
Mm.
and a lot of the big companies have these teams that write for them, and then come and work with us. And I'm still like, has the speaker got any idea about this? Because they're oft like, I don't even know what these teams do half the time, like, then because it's definitely not what the speaker is intending. And then
Mm.
you end up on rehearsal night, and sometimes it's the first time the
They're seeing
speaker has actually seen the presentation, and they're like, what's this? God. So the speakers often leave it to a very last minute to look
yeah.
at something if a team have created it, and that's a big challenge. So, like you, we've really focused on creating a process and really sort of trying to tick off those boxes of asking the questions, making sure that the right people are involved
Yeah.
and what they're trying to achieve, what is their measure of success.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it is. Otherwise, everything, like everyone is losing a lot of time. I mean, everybody.
Oh, the wasted time. And if we just had one conversation, and
Mm.
that really is the sort of what is the key thing that you want people to walk away remembering,
Mm.
or what action is it that you want them to change and do differently? What are those key things you want them to remember?
Yeah.
And once you've kind of got those locked down, then you can build everything else around it. And so many of our clients will actually not really know who they're speaking to, and some of them will just be told, you in 2 weeks you're giving this presentation, or you in 2 days you're giving this
Mm.
presentation, but they're not really told what on. They've just got all this information, so then they just don't really know. They just grab all these slides from different places and chuck it up on the screen and read it.
Yeah.
So
That is another issue that we also see. Not only understanding the audience, but not only understanding what do you want to achieve, but also who is going to be in front of you. Like that is in no one's radar. I mean, no one cares. What we end up seeing more, like very often, is people who build otherwise very important presentations for them and their businesses or organizations in the last few minutes of, like, before the talk itself. And then later on they ask, like, why didn't it work, or I think it was not good enough. And I'm like, so what do you expect? Like, what were your expectations? To work on something for 10 minutes and make it Apple level? Like, what do you think? Seriously, I mean, sorry for being that honest, but you know,
yeah.
how would that happen? Anyhow,
Well, you've got
oh,
to invest the time, and I think now, like, time is the most precious thing we
yeah,
have,
totally.
and especially now that everyone's zooming and teaming and
Mm,
spending so much time, it's so important to not take up lots of people's time.
mm,
And so you have to put the work in if you expect people to pay attention
mm,
and give you their time.
yeah,
So I think you're right. If they're only going to put 10 minutes of time in, then why should I bother listening to you? It's
Yeah,
Um,
it doesn't work this way. Absolutely.
no,
Okay, so
no.
the world moved, however, as you said, like the zooming and stuff like that. Like the world moved from in-person live events to Zooms and Teams and WebExes and Blue Jeanses and Google Meets and many more.
What was this one? Blue
Blue
jeans.
Jeans, don't
I
you
don't know
know it?
this one.
Oh, you better not know it. Trust me,
Okay,
because
good.
the user interface
I
is
don't need any more.
no, no, nobody needs anymore. So, what are you seeing is different there? Like between those two worlds, what are the biggest kind of differences in your opinion?
So there's a lot of advantages,
Okay.
and I think at the moment they outweigh the disadvantages, but people are starting to get itchy feet and not work from home as well as they were. Like before, it was exciting.
Mm,
Now it's dragging on. It's a bit like, oh. And so um, I think that the good points are there's less travel involved. So the costs for as a team, for my team, we've saved a lot of money by not having to fly around Australia or Asia to deliver presentations.
mm,
We've created online training courses, so those um, mean less travel and
yeah,
hotels and things like that. And the same for the clients. They don't have to fly their teams around. So
yeah.
I think that's going to be a change that will hold for the future.
Mm,
And um, the other thing I think I've seen is that if the presentations go on for too long, as in more than 10
okay.
minutes, then you lose the engagement with the audience pretty quickly. And it's the same rule as a normal presentation. If you're just literally reading off the script of the
Yeah.
slide, don't bother having a presentation, just send them the pack and they can read it in their own time.
Mm, yeah.
There's no point in reading the words to someone. You've got to have a key insight that's really relevant, really emotional, so that they're excited,
Mm,
and definitely get your audience to put their video on,
yeah.
because I've had cases in my team where I'm like, where's that face gone? And you don't want like you want to be able to see that people are still engaged and not doing the Trump thing of tweeting during a presentation or something. And
Okay.
so yeah, so and like Teams is great for that, when you can see the audience and everyone kind of feels like they're in the same room, in is it all together mode. That's great. We
The
use
new
that.
one, the new mode in
Yeah.
Microsoft Teams. Yeah, I heard that there are a lot more layouts like those kind.
Yes.
So
And you
like,
can present and you can send emoticons, because I think that's another thing. Like, I'm quite used to it in Asia anyway, because often in Asia, when you present, it's very hard to gauge a reaction. They're thinking, they're super, like, but the reactions the facial expressions don't always show. Like, my face is a zero. I'd be terrible at poker. Like, I'm all over the place. But um, I think that's another restriction of video, is that we don't get as engaged and as emotional. And
mm,
as we know, it's emotions and passion that drives decision making.
yeah,
So on your Zoom or whatever, you've got this opportunity to engage and make your audience feel passionate about something.
yeah.
And that's harder when you're not in the room with them.
Way
Um,
harder. Yeah.
but there's tricks to it. Making sure that they can see more of you, so
Yeah.
that they can see your hands,
Mm,
keeping it shorter, and a like getting people excited about why they should come. So making sure that the lead up to the presentation, you know who's coming, you know what they want, what they need, what their problems are, all those sorts of things. And you're actually giving them something that they can't find on Google, because
Yeah.
that's like, what's the point? And then following up, I think that it's the same as any presentation. We fail to follow up and send links and ask for feedback, see what people think. Like, I think that's a big area.
Yeah. And nowadays, if you think about this PowerPoint Live thing that happened, I don't know how many of the listeners who know what PowerPoint Live is, but if you go on the PowerPoint, like if you upload your presentation to PowerPoint online nowadays, right? And if you're Office 365, I think only, right? It's also
I
Office
think
365.
subscription even,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think only Office 365, and go to a slideshow tab. There is a button that's called Present PowerPoint Live, or Presentation Live, or Presenting Live, or like, I don't know. It is just, like Microsoft are changing the words constantly on
Every
that one.
day.
Yeah, but that one is definitely interesting because it has all of those emojis reaction. People can look at their phones, give comments, give feedback, all of those things, which is very, 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 very interesting. I remember, by the way, when we were together in Seattle, and when they showed this to us, and we were like, "What is
It's
this now
so
happening?"
cool. I
Yeah,
mean, who doesn't love a good emoji? And for a speaker to then look back on that,
yeah,
it's really insightful too, because
hmm,
they can see what's working. Like, if it triggers a reaction, then they're like, "Wow, that actually got engagement." So
yeah.
that's really helpful.
Constant feedback loop, like constantly searching for ways to improve the presentations that you deliver. Like that is a
And
must.
it shows, I mean, I work so much with some of the old school people who are like, "Oh, I've been doing this for years and like, I don't need any help, love." Or, and then they get up on stage and they are so confident
Yeah.
that they just talk for ages and everyone
Mm,
switches off, and it's just like,
mm,
oh God. So being too confident, I think, is a massive negative.
yeah.
Whereas what I want to do is encourage the people that are shy and nervous, but they can be very smart and they've got something to say.
Mm,
So it's about giving them the skills to speak up and share that wisdom, because
yeah.
otherwise they've been too shy to share it. And I
Mm,
think that being live on a camera is less intimidating than standing in the front of a boardroom or of 20 people with executives all around you, just sort of glaring at you or tapping their pens,
yeah.
or arms folded.
Mm,
Um, Theirs is like a big sort of auditorium or something. Um, but that can equally mean people don't put the preparation in.
yeah.
And they
That's
just
true.
say,
Yeah. Do you think that, like you said, that online is obviously different and more difficult? Do you see the people that you work with preparing more, understanding that it's way more difficult to present, or like, what's the
no.
feedback?
And in fact, I see the opposite, and it's really sad, because I
Okay.
think they think, yeah, I'll just give them what I've got. Or there's something about the fact, like I just said, it's less intimidating. For some people, it's just less of a bother. And so they just they miss an opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think that's good, because we can maybe have less presentations. We can focus on just sending out reports of the information.
Mm,
But then when we do have a presentation and we really want to influence people, then we invest that time. We're clear on the rules, the process,
mm,
and we nail it, and we
yeah.
get people excited and we make a difference, and that's what it's about.
Yeah, it's very sad to hear like that. Even in your case, where you are in a completely different environment, country, people are so different. Even there, which I don't know whether or not it surprises me anymore. But it's sad to see that people are not taking advantage, and for so many years, people underestimate the importance of presentations. Like it's so
Yeah. And we all, and it's devastating because we've all worked so hard as a kind of a niche design group that's finally sort of found its feet, got the support of Microsoft to
mm,
share and be heard and give people the value of, and the importance of presentations. And then, and the event industry as a whole just
mhm,
got crippled. I mean, we
yeah,
lost in 1 week pretty much the whole year's work coming up.
yeah,
And it was devastating. And then for me to try and keep the team optimistic
yeah.
um, was hard, especially when I shut the office down. I was like, well, guys, we're just gonna work from home for a bit. And I was very, very lucky because Australia just went into lockdown.
Yeah,
They literally, for weeks, you couldn't go anywhere. And then Melbourne had a second round of like 8 weeks of being
which
under
is crazy.
curfew
Yeah,
and stuff. So um, I didn't have to pay rent, which was a good thing.
yeah,
And the team enjoyed working from home. We put lots of rules in, like making sure they went for walks and all those things. But
yeah.
now, when we first did the survey, 100% of the team said that they didn't want to come and work back in an office full time.
Really?
Yeah, like no, not one of them wanted to work 5 days a week from an office.
Wow, that
And
is
now we've done a second survey 6 months on. This
okay.
is actually on my LinkedIn profile. I've got a comparison of the two surveys.
Follow him on LinkedIn.
Um,
Okay.
and it's changed. So
Really? Okay.
they now want 2 days a week in the office because they're missing each other. And now the government is letting us um, see each other.
Yeah.
But I'm scared of what if it comes back. So I don't want to sign a lease until so we're going to share, like, there's hundreds of sort of shared office
Yeah,
spaces
of
and
course.
stuff. And so we're going to try the 2 days a week. And that would be really nice, I think, for the team and for collaboration and um, yeah, getting to
Coming
work,
back.
getting excited again.
Yeah. So having said all of that, by the way, that first number shocked me completely. Even though I am hearing this from other companies which are not in our industry, they are HR managers and HR directors who are very worried here in Sofia when the government allowed for people to go back to the offices if they decide, if they decide. And the HR managers, we were talking, and they were like, "No one came back." I was like,
Mm,
"Really?" I was like, "No one." Like 2 or 3 people out of 400 or 500. I was like, wow, that is crazy. I mean, that is insane. Because like I'm very worried that we are now becoming not a team but a group of freelancers, which
yes.
is which is very different. Like that is very very different. Anyhow, let's keep it.
And very hard to keep um, the motivation.
Yeah.
And for some people, they just can't handle being on their own all day.
Oh yeah.
And it is very isolating. And that's what went up on the scale.
Yeah.
We've got a few people that live close to each other, so they kind of teamed up.
Yeah.
But it's very tricky because for us, or I assume it's worldwide, but the social distancing thing means that 4 people only can go in a lift, and we've got hundreds of city blocks
Mm.
that if you put there's a new area in the that they've just finished building, and it's got all of the big banks and everything there. And
Mm.
if you only allow 4 people in a lift, they worked out it could take some people 45 minutes just to get from the bottom of the lift upstairs to their desk if they
Jesus.
maintain social distancing. So when, at what point will, it's only until they get a vaccine will those
Yeah.
people be able to go
Obviously.
back to an office.
Yeah. So
Um,
having said all of that, like I think the answer is clear, but hopefully managers, people who are leaders, team leads, managers, even the assistants of managers, or every person out there, to be honest, who is listening to this one, like if we have to say, hey, is it way more important nowadays to communicate better, or is the like what is the status quo there? Like, is it nowadays even more important to focus our efforts in communicating better, or is it just because it's Zoom and I'm at home, um, we shouldn't care that much? Like, what's your take on that?
My take on that is that we can use Zoom or Teams for chatting with our colleagues
Yeah,
if we just need to talk about something.
yeah,
But if we're going to invite groups of
yeah.
people and we have something specific to say, then plan it. Get
Mm,
everyone excited, tell them why they need to come, get their videos up so you can see that they're engaged, and tell them the importance of it, and then follow up, because there is so much importance now on keeping people motivated,
mm,
giving people hope that and reassurance for some of the smaller companies.
mm.
I don't know about you, but they're calling them zombie companies over here.
Haven't heard that. Yeah.
Which is company, because in Australia the government have been supporting small agencies, but they
Mm,
say that
yeah.
when that money stops, these companies will all collapse and it will, because the
Okay.
economy will crash. So those are the zombie companies, and we need to reassure people that clients are coming back, and we need to reassure clients to come
Come
back,
back. Yeah.
because there is so much value in what we do. There was before, and there still is now,
Yeah.
um, and that's what's really important.
Yeah, which is obviously a hard task. Like it's taking, or already, at least in my understanding, on our end, like we are on the market for 5 years. I know like there are organizations out there like which are 10, 20, even 30 years in the presentation space. And when we talk with each other, everyone is like, it's still that hard to
Yes.
sell and to kind of push the message that, hey, we are here, we can help you. And every single time it is so strange when you see that presentations close multi-million, gazillion-dollar deals. They they motivate people. They win startup investments, funds, whatever. Like they are able to achieve the goal, the business goal that they need to achieve, and yet people and a lot of businesses still are like, hmm, it's just a presentation. Like who
Yeah.
cares? Yeah, but that is slowly but steadily changing. I think. I don't know what's your like whether or not you are seeing that, but I think that is slowly but steadily changing because all of that's around us. Like when Apple goes on stage, when Microsoft goes on stage, when all of those companies that are spending crazy amount of time and resources on their presentations and they
Hmm.
become big deal, right?
Yeah.
You
And
like
they
you,
stay online, like that
yeah,
staying
yeah, the
on.
streaming
Yeah.
part and being there forever so that you can
Yeah.
see it and people are sharing it to you and say, hey, our presentations are a lot like those.
Yeah.
Like why are not like
Exactly.
those, right?
This,
So
and it's the CEO's presentations that are the best, and then
yeah,
it kind of gets lower and lower.
yeah,
And that is a very actually interesting and important fact, that we're going to be having these virtual events.
yeah,
Everything will break out into groups, and we'll have
yeah,
different presentations that you choose to go to. So I think the whole event industry will just shift online,
yeah,
but the presentations are still just as important,
yeah,
if not
even
more
more important.
important than ever. And we've got more time and resources to focus on those. And one interesting thing for me was that one company, who I won't name,
Yeah.
but they're listed on the stock exchange, and they have to everyone has to show their their
Reports
quarterly
in
or
your
half quarterly reports. And my God, they looked awful. And those are online for everyone to see.
yeah.
They weren't formatted properly. They had the wrong brand. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So they're not even thinking it, like some poor secretary somewhere was struggling to do that. And that stuff is like
Everyone
what
sees
goes
it.
online stays online. And
Yeah.
yes.
That's something that we also try to push everyone that like we work with, especially what you said with the annual quarterly reports, earnings, etc. Like, and especially when they are not even public, but when they are
Mm,
being sent to managers and executives inside of the company, like you are being asked to present once every 3 months, right? However, what you're presenting is insanely important. I mean, it is insanely important. You are building that. Like, why don't you try to do the best thing you can do, having in mind how much visibility that document has?
mm.
Like, how much and who is looking at that document? Don't you sometimes understand that these people, the next time when they're looking for someone to hire or to bring up in the hierarchy, even in a corporate organization, they are going to remember, they are going to come up with a name first, right? But
Yeah.
who is going to be that name is very, very interesting question, right? I mean,
No,
anyway.
you're right. It's super important to be heard as an employee. And I think, well, there's so much noise out there now
Mm,
that you do have an opportunity through your presentation to
yeah,
share your point of view.
yeah,
And so even with those documents that are just reports of
yeah,
lots of information, if the managers or executives are sitting in a room or sitting at home reading through it, they're gonna are you asking them to draw their own conclusion, or are you giving them yours?
yeah.
And so then up front, you're sharing your insights, making it very clear that this is your opinion, and then they've got the information behind. So not missing that opportunity as well.
Yeah, I remember, like now I remember like a few cases where even a report like this, which we were building, sure, but a report like this for one of the banks, which you said like it's very exciting to work for a bank, at at the beginning, but we were building a report like it was probably 7 or 8 months ago. I don't remember, but that report, like the power of that report, and then I reported this and shared it with our team because sometimes we don't understand what a presentation can mean for somebody, because
Mm.
the presentation that we built that was actually a report itself was actually sent to the owner of the bank in Russia. And this person we knew was aiming to cut and lay off a lot of people in that bank. However, the presentation itself and what was presented in it was so well done, and the preparation in terms of the business side, right? Not just the presentation itself, but the business projects, the ideas, the way they were communicated through that presentation or document, in this case, were so well done and so convincing that he actually didn't lay off people. He hired 20 or 30 more
Oh
just
my
because of that
gosh,
document. And I
that is
said this to the
such
team,
confidence.
and I said it to the team, and I'm like, your friends, people that you know, people in your family may have been the ones that were selected to be laid off. Do you understand that? Like, do you really understand that our work and the work of our industry sometimes touches the lives of people, like in a big way? And in this case, it's, yeah, I mean, it's 20 to 30 people, but the next time it will be more. I mean, it's insane. It is that powerful. If it's done well, it could be very, very powerful. Emma, you have
True,
a book.
truly.
Tell us a little bit about the book. You have a book, and it's really
Do
beautifully
you have a
designed. When we
book?
got it, by the way, we had like we were waiting for that book for so long because it was not on Amazon. I believe it was only through
No,
a
it
friend.
wasn't on Amazon. No,
Okay,
I
yeah,
can't remember why I chose not to, but yeah, it's visual thinking.
Yeah.
So, and it's really my way of sharing kind of my thoughts on that process again. So sort of it's a step-by-step guide, 5 ways in which to help your presentation transform how you're communicating. So if communication is not particularly your skill set, it's giving you those tools to really try and influence your audience. And I'm a very visual person, so I remember things based on what color they are, what shape they are. Not everyone does. Some people are analytical. They remember the numbers, they've got photographic memories. But really, we just need a combination.
Yeah.
And that's the way that we get through to everyone.
Yeah.
And
Did you design the book yourself?
no, my friend designed it, but I wrote it.
Obviously. Obviously you wrote it. That was one of the, like, it's a very, you can say, like a small form factor,
Yeah.
right? But it
It's very
is,
easy to read.
yeah, it is so easy to read. I took it. I was, by the way, in the same place where people won't see the video, obviously, but I was in the same place. I went through it for like a few hours, and I was like, done. I
Yeah,
was
that's
done.
what it takes.
Yeah, I mean,
Probably
it
only
was
one
super.
hour.
Yeah, it was super quick read. However, it's beautifully designed. I mean, that was so nice.
Yeah, she
So
did
can
a great
so
job.
is it somewhere? Where can people find it today? Is it
And
only on the
they can
website?
find it on my website. So
Okay.
under presentationstudio.com,
Yeah.
and then under our services, there's the thought leadership.
Yeah.
And that's my profile and where you can buy it from.
Yeah. So it's visual thinking here.
Yeah. I
Oh
think
my
one
god.
of our resources, we were going to share the first chapter as well. So I'm not sure if that's live yet. I'll check that.
Okay. Perfect. We'll link
Okay.
that up for sure. So
Yeah.
Emma, before we go, because it's almost an hour now. I don't know when this happened, but anyway. So one last advice to people who are listening to this one that are being asked to present on a daily basis. They may like it or may not, right? But they're being asked. Let's kind of finish up with something they should try, something they should do, something they should read, obviously, except for the book, that's clear. Something they should check. Like, what is that one thing that we should leave them with that they can kind of do? It's December is coming. We are recording this in December. Hopefully, we'll push that podcast in December. It's Christmas, it's New Year's Eve. So, what would you do when you're locked down, except for working on presentations? I mean, your New Year's Eve is a perfect moment to work on your presentation skills in first place. So,
Yeah.
like,
And
what is
rehearsing
that?
them.
Yeah, what is one thing that we can leave them with that you can say, hey, this will help you. Like that would help you. You said a
Okay.
lot of things, the audience, obviously, but anything else?
Yeah. So let's assume that we've followed the process of what we've discussed
Yeah,
already, with the what's your objective, what's
yeah,
the needs of the audience who's going to be there.
yeah,
You've written your story, the structure, and you've designed it beautifully.
yeah.
That's not where it stops.
Okay.
Where that's basically where it starts in terms of
Okay.
you the speaker, rehearsing.
Yeah,
And one tip, and I can't remember who shared it with me, but is to print out your presentation, 3 slides to a page with the notes lines
yeah,
next to it,
yeah,
and give it to a colleague, give it to a member of your family, and deliver your presentation to them and ask them to write down notes on the slides where they didn't quite understand, or you weren't clear, or to give
okay,
some feedback. So not to constantly interrupt you, but to have that feedback, and then just keep rehearsing and asking different people and asking your gran. And if your gran doesn't understand, then there's something wrong. So
yeah,
that's where it comes. It's the confidence to deliver, and it's not flicking through the slides on your screen, reading it in
yeah,
your head, because the way we speak is incredibly different to the way that we read.
Yeah.
And so, especially if you've only got a certain time slot,
Yeah.
rehearsing in your head
Mm.
is not the same as
Yeah.
rehearsing out loud.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So rehearse, rehearse, rehearse is the key message, and get feedback and adapt based on that feedback.
Get feedback. And I mean, I think that was not mainly, but a huge part of Steve Jobs' legacy is that, his slides look super simple.
Yeah.
But they look super simple because of the words that he had that matched them.
Yeah.
They were simple, supportive slides because he was so charismatic and emotional and passionate about what he was selling. And he knew his stuff. He'd been working on it for how many years? And he'd rehearsed.
Yeah. So by the way, funny story here to end up maybe with that one. I recently had a friend of mine who wanted to do something together with us. And he was like, I really believe, looking at Steve Jobs, that the slides are not the most important thing. And if you look at his slides, these are his words, like they were not something special. And I'm like, you think so? Like, really? Do you understand why you consider his slides as not something special? Because the design of those slides, it's obvious that what he's saying is exactly what you want to hear as his audience. It's obvious that, as you said, he's very confident, he's very prepared. He's famous of how intensive he was rehearsing, how many times, etc. And that's why you see those theater level performances out of him. But I asked him, like, why do you think that these slides are just so simple? Like, do you see what happens with great design? Like, great design is seamless, and this is what, before you say that they were simple, yes, they were, right? But don't think that they are that simple, because behind that there is just a ton
There's a lot of work. And you're right, because you can get a client that says, you're charging how much for 2 words on the slide?
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's the thinking behind that and the whole process. And
yeah, it's a long story. Let's not we'll talk about that in another episode for sure. So Emma,
cut that bit out.
The presentation, so Visual Thinking, the book, presentationstudio.com. I would also say, everyone, hey, check Presentation Studio's YouTube channel. You're uploading some really crazy things there. Your team is pushing the limits of PowerPoint's animation and motion design tremendously. I remember the first time when you showed in Redmond what your team was doing with animation in PowerPoint. I was like, wow, that is super nice stuff. That one, people can find you on LinkedIn, I believe, right? That's the best way.
And I'm doing a lot more on LinkedIn, actually. I'm finding I get a lot of engagement and people asking questions. So I've written a lot of articles lately. So on my profile, which I think is LinkedIn at Emma B, but I'll share you
we'll
the
link
link.
it up.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of interesting articles on there as well.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Emma, for spending the time. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure too.
It was like 3 months. Let's do it. Emails, LinkedIn, emails, LinkedIn. Let's move it to emails now again. I'm like, sure.
And then we still got the wrong day.
That's also the case. The calendar appointments messed up. Anyway, we did it. So thanks again for being part of this episode, part of this podcast. We are going to link up absolutely everything that you guys are doing. And hopefully we'll do that again,
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, why not?
I've enjoyed it. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, keep your Surface Studio safe.
It's not going anywhere. My kids keep trying to play Fortnite on it, and I'm like, get off!
Okay. This is very expensive machine, kids. Get out of here. Okay, thanks again for spending the time. For everyone who wants to know more about Emma, you see the resources and the links in the show notes. And for everyone that's listening to this podcast for the first time, take a look at what our agency is also doing. It's 356labs.com and not 365labs.com. Many people miss that out for some reason. And obviously the event that's coming up in April, which is called Present to Succeed. That one is a big one, so check it out. Thanks again for listening, and see you in the next one.